at least had like a half of a good season once. They've promoted Greg Williams to interim head coach with Freddie Kitchens. Household name Freddie Kitchens. That's what we're going to call him. His nickname is going to be household name Freddie Kitchens, the offensive coordinator of the Browns. What do you know? Because I'll tell you, I know nothing except that no matter who Greg Williams is and no matter who Freddie Kitchens is, there's no doubt in my mind they're better than Hue Jackson. So go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people do know Greg Williams, the Bounty Gate guy, just a fired-up character on Hard Knocks. So a lot of people recognize him, but Freddie Kitchens just a complete unknown. And on his Wikipedia page, which is one of the few sources of information on him, it calls him Freddie the Chef Kitchens. So who knows if that's even legit? I hope it is. It's a pretty badass nickname, Freddie the Chef Kitchens. Whether it is or not, who knows? But there are a few interesting little historical roots we want to just analyze. And again, I will just preface this by saying we are grasping at straws. We're not saying these are definite conclusions about what Freddie Kitchens is about to chef up for this Browns offense. But we do know they have some talent there still. They've been underperforming all year. Todd Haley got surprisingly
all year.
Yeah, exactly. For like the last decade.
2.5 years.
Right,
well, yeah,
exactly.
like longer.
But
you talk about you grasping at straws. I'll tell you who's grasping at straws. The Cleveland fucking Browns are grasping at straws here. The chef is in the house.
But this is exactly the chef is in the house. This is the first year they've really actually had some promising talent and still underperformed, in my opinion, though. Which is why let's see what the chef can cook up with these ingredients. A few things just to know about the guy, and then what do I think it means for fantasy. One, he has some Bruce Arians roots. You love Bruce Arians roots. We're going to talk about the Cardinals offense, which under Byron Leftwich, a Bruce Arians disciple, just sparked a lot of gains, the best season bests for a lot of key players there with the Cardinals. So we're hoping that maybe the Bruce Arians magic fairy dust rubs off on Kitchens, who was his quarterbacks coach over from 2013 to 2016, which is coincidentally the time that Carson Palmer's career kind of had that renaissance and he really came back to life, and they had those huge explosive offensive seasons. So he was clearly a key part of that as the quarterbacks coach, and he was even played under Bruce Arians when he was at Alabama. Bruce Arians was his coordinator, and this Freddie Kitchens guy was his quarterback. So they clearly have some sort of history. You have to imagine Arians is somewhere embedded in Kitchens, which is only a good thing. Obviously that doesn't mean he's going to be Bruce Arians, but a lengthy track record with one of the brightest offensive minds that's produced some real fantasy monsters over the years cannot be considered a negative. But then on the flip side, Freddie Kitchens has legitimately no coordinating experience. He's been around football for 20 years in the college level and then the pro year combined, and he has never once been promoted to a coordinator role, which has to sketch you out a little bit. He's never crafted his own offense. He's never called his own plays. He's served as quarterbacks, tight ends, and running backs coach over his NFL career, but still, that's a pretty big jump, especially to jump into a dumpster fire mid-season. That's not the setup or recipe for success for a Kitchen. Never mind Freddie Kitchens. So it's a greater chance that this offense just continues to implode, probably, given this type of setup. But really, how much further can you sink down, considering how much they've underwhelmed despite adding so much talent this year? It's still definitely noteworthy that he's never been a coordinator at any years. But the number 3 thing, the last thing to know about him, is he has called plays once. And that was preseason week 4 this year. And it was actually a pretty dominant performance. Yes, this is preseason week 4. I get it. We are clasping at straws. You never want to make a definite conclusion off of preseason. But still, it doesn't hurt that in that 4th preseason game, the team racked up 35 points, 422 total yards, and 22 first downs, which were all season highs in a regulation game. The Raiders OT game then exceeded that. But still, other than that, it's the second best game this offense has had. Again, yes, fourth preseason game. I get it. It's all the scrubs out there. But Baker Mayfield did play. He had 2 drives, and they got points on both of them, strung together 2 scoring drives, 138 yards, moved very efficiently. Nick Chubb capped that off with the score. Nick Chubb was, again, the running back for this running back coach. So what to draw real quick out of this? Baker Mayfield, I think, benefits. I mean, former quarterback and player in terms of Freddie Kitchens was. We've seen that Matt Nagy, a former quarterback, and then Mitch Trubisky really help establish that rapport, that comfort level. And again, Carson Palmer had had that career renaissance under Freddie Kitchens as his quarterback coach. I don't think any of those are negatives for Baker Mayfield. I expect, Todd Haley, a very stubborn-minded guy. I bet Freddie Kitchens will be much more welcoming, kind of allow Baker Mayfield to be part of that game planning process and really just work into what he does best, whereas Haley might not have been so open-minded and let just somebody else put their fingerprints on. I think Baker Mayfield will have a lot more control moving forward, which I don't think is a bad thing. He's a smart guy, knows what he does well. I expect this to be a positive for Baker Mayfield, even if it's not a huge one. And then the running game. Is it going to be a workhorse like David Johnson, or are they going to maybe revitalize Duke Johnson instead of just giving Nick Chubb that full 3-down horse roll? That remains to be seen. It can't be a negative necessarily for Chubb. I think he still gets those early down carries. But what I expect it to be is more of a revival for Duke Johnson. Again, one of the most dynamic pass-catching backs over these last 3 years, has been rotting this entire season, just completely misused and underutilized. I can see Freddie Kitchens kind of splitting this guy out wide more often, recognizing we don't have a ton of talent. We need to use our running backs more creatively, just as Arians had before him. So those would be the two areas I'd look for in terms of fantasy improvement. Might be the running backs and Baker Mayfield to go alongside it. That's all we know. That's probably the most in-depth Freddie Kitchens report you'll get out there, because I looked for more and I couldn't find anything. This was pieced together through a ton of different little random sources I found. Hopefully this helps out, though, and hopefully, there's nowhere to really go but up. So I'm excited just to see what happens here for the Browns moving forward. What are your thoughts on Freddie Kitchens, Nat?
Well, first of all, I think excited is maybe pushing it a little too far as far as like what I'm looking forward to. I'm intrigued, I guess. I'm fascinated by the decade-long train wreck that is the Cleveland Browns. What do I think of Freddie Kitchens? I like him. I like him because he reminds me a lot of me, because neither one of us had ever had a coordinator job before today. And so we come from the same camp in that respect. We have exactly the same amount of experience in that respect. So could you put me in there at head coach and do better than Hue Jackson? Probably about as well. Probably about as well. I would probably say, like, hey, Baker, what do you want to do? And he would do it, and I would be, I'd be a player's coach. I don't know. I think it's going to be a disaster. Yeah. But I have said, as you know, for the past, at least year and a half, I think Hue Jackson's the worst there is. And they had to get out from under that guy. You just cut ties. You can't keep throwing good money after bad, and he's the worst there is. So whatever. It's a bad scene firing someone in the middle of the year, and that's on the front office. They should have fired the guy at the end of the year or the end of last year. Right. They didn't. But I got to say, we worked together for a long time, and when there was somebody that just wasn't working out, sometimes you just had to get rid of them. Yep. And I subscribe to that same theory with this. So we'll see what happens. All right, let's get into the actual up stocks. Hue Jackson, Kitchens, none of those actually fall into that category. But anyway, let's talk about up stocks. I'm going to keep us to 2 minutes tops on these things so we can get it moving. And we're going to start out with Marlon Mack. That's a guy that I was, kind of grudgingly for the last few weeks have been saying, yeah, if you're going to go in on somebody in the Indianapolis backfield, that's the guy I'd go in on. That's the guy they were all up on in the preseason. He's here. It kind of looks like what he's doing is not a fluke. Had another big game, huh?
Absolutely. I know last week we kind of said don't trust it quite yet. It's a committee-ridden backfield, and Mack, we can't just make judgments off this one game against the worst Buffalo run defense in the league. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. But then he comes out and even tops that performance. 159 total yards, 2 touchdowns. The guy is just a monster. And again, even rewrote that committee script, now taking 62.8% of the snaps, the season high 25 carries, and season high total touches of 27. So, this seems to me like he's really bucked that committee trend. 27 touches does not scream committee to me. It was another favorable script. They got up big against the awful Raiders, but Luck's playing really well right now. He's got a full weapons cabinet with Doyle, we'll talk about in a second back. This offense is really clicking, and they're building pretty big leads early and then bleeding the clock out with Mack, and it's worked for 2 weeks in a row. Let's hope Reich's smart enough to keep riding that. And I do think he's a pretty bright play caller here. So I like what they're doing. I think Mack is really excelling, just ripping off huge chunk plays every time you get him a chance to. So I think this is no fluke. I think it's going to continue rolling. It'll be most interesting to see if they get down big early. How is Mack's usage affected? Does he become a complete bust and a zero, or is he still pretty involved, although his ceiling just gets lowered a little bit? That's what you got to establish moving forward, but you got to be very encouraged that he's done this 2 weeks in a row now. I'd consider him a very high RB2, if not even a low-end RB1 with the right matchups moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a little more hesitant on him, even though I've thought he was the Colts running back to have for a while now. I mean, I'm scared of injury with him, maybe more so than I even should be, but that's kind of the red flag that just keeps going off in my head. So we'll see what happens. I don't have the same faith in Frank Reich that you do, but I definitely think that the Colts, they're doing. I'd say they're exceeding expectations, and Mack's probably primed to be a part of that if he stays healthy moving forward. All right, let's talk about Chris Carson. This is a guy that I'm a fan of, and I drafted in a couple different leagues and choked on for a while. But he had another 100-yard game. I think that's 3 out of his last 4. He seems to be the dominant back. I mean, officially Davis gets a couple carries, but less than half as many. I think as Carson and Penny. Good gosh. I mean, Penny, talk about a zero. I mean, and that's not news, but man, is he even worth a roster spot for anyone? Of course not.
No, not even close. And I think zero is actually the perfect word to use there because he played exactly 0 snaps this week, which you'd think what makes that really important to me is the fact that this is a fresh out of the bye week. This is when teams often will kind of hit the reset button and say, all right, we have a first-round running back. Let's start using this guy. Let's get him more involved. Let's not make this guy a complete waste of a pick. But it was the complete opposite. They said, no, let's double down on Carson. He's been rumbling. Why would we mess with that? And now that you've seen that, you got to expect moving forward, this is the attack. And you can feel much better about Carson. And you're already feeling good because, like you said, 3 out of his last 4 100-yard games, but there was that risk. Penny started to get involved the week before the bye, and okay, what if this guy turns it on? That's not happening. He played 0 snaps. Mike Davis is still ahead of him, and Carson is still well ahead of both of them. 25 carries, just a bell cow type of feeding. Yes, the matchup was good against the Lions. We talked about that on our preview podcast, but still 27 touches to just 11 for Davis to 0 snaps for Penny. This is the Carson backfield. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't fluke this summer when everybody was raving that this was going to be the guy over in Seattle. A lot of us said, no way, they spent a first-round pick. They're just trying to motivate this guy. A lot of experts going that route, but Chris Carson clearly is the real deal, and he's clearly the guy to own here unless an injury happens. You got to feel really good about him as an every-week RB2 with RB1 upside against these joke teams like the Lions. He's the back. He is the back to own, and it's clearer than day now.
Yeah, I didn't start him this week, and it's probably going to cost me the game.
Ooh, who'd you play over him?
Nick Chubb.
I know that was a tough call. That's a tough one, but
tough. It was a tough call, and I mean, I definitely thought about it. I mean, I also could have played him over John Brown, who had a lousy game, and obviously, in retrospect, I wish I had. But Brown's a top 20 receiver, so
fresh off a 30-point day, right?
Yeah, I guessed wrong, and I paid for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, won't happen again. I'm starting him next week. Larry Fitzgerald and the entire Cardinals offense, fantasy rising under new offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich, and much similar to this whole Hue Jackson out thing, they only could go up. Right. I mean, this is one of those things where is everyone's like, oh, is Leftwich going to drastically improve the Cardinals offense? It's like, well, he could not possibly make it any worse.
Right.
So what did he do last week or yesterday, I guess, that you're so impressed with?
Well, for one, everybody set career high, or not career highs. Again, I keep saying that. Season highs.
Season highs.
Yeah, career highs. Byron Leftwich making magic for Larry Fitz.
David Johnson ran for 268 yards.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, not career highs, but season highs. And again, like you said, there's nowhere to really go but up when Mike McCoy was the one calling the shots. But we got a season high from Larry Fitz. We got a season high from Josh Rosen. We got a season high receiving yards from David Johnson. So a lot of promising signs here under the first week of Byron Leftwich. And this, again, wasn't like off a bye where he had time to implement his scheme and really practice things. They had to kind of do this on the fly. But it was noticeable that it was a much different offense. They huddled and moved at a much different pace, especially after 3 quarters. There was only 3 points through 3 quarters, and everyone's just like, oh, Byron Leftwich got way too much hype. What a joke. But then it seemed like he almost almost flipped into what he truly wanted to do, which was no huddle. They moved it with a emphasis, and Josh Rosen looked as comfortable as can be. They found a real nice cadence after the game. He said, "I've never felt this comfortable on a pro field." So it seems to me like everything is trending upwards under Leftwich. Another Arians disciple. We talked about Kitchens earlier. Leftwich was much more ingrained with Bruce Arians and highly praised by Bruce Arians time and time again. We saw more creative receiving usage from David Johnson. We saw Larry Fitz, who Byron Leftwich cited before the week started, that this was a guy that still had plenty left and we want to force feed him the ball and get it to him. He goes and sees 12 targets, 8 catches, 102 yards, and a score. You got to feel really, really good about that as well. And Christian Kirk even finding the end zone for a game-winning touchdown with 30 seconds left. All of those things just are promising signs. They now have a bye week to really start to install the rest of the Leftwich fingerprints in this offense. So I think moving forward, great buy lows all around. If somebody didn't realize that Byron Leftwich had this offense turning around, it's a great time to go into David Johnson and Larry Fitz, in my opinion.
All right, Doug Martin looks ready for weekly fantasy running back 2/flex status.
I know.
I don't know, man.
Right. Remember, like last year.
Sell me on this. Sell me why this is.
I'm not going to be able to sell you too much because it's not something I'm just like die hard all in on either. Especially after last year, he looked great that first week he got featured when he came back and Muscle Hamsters returned, and we all felt awesome. Let's see it in a couple weeks. Let's see if he's still maintaining that solid almost 5 yards a clip, that receiving usage. But still, you got to be encouraged that he saw 15 to 10 touches as compared to Jalen Richard. Even with a negative game flow working against him most of the game, he was still definitely the more locked-in go-to guy. So if there's more respectable scripts, you could have even bigger days. You hate that he got stuffed twice on the goal line, but you also love that he got 2 chances at the goal line and was their first guy up when they're in the red zone. So if he can improve that and get more efficient, he used to be an end zone beast. So hopefully he can regain that. They have a powerful line. It just didn't work today. But the fact that he's getting used and he's the only guy getting those goal line carries has to be considered a positive. You just feel better. I mean, there's good volume and good production, which you can't be mad about for a guy that you just snagged off the waiver wire. With bye week, 6 teams on buys over these next couple weeks. Doug Martin should be working his way in the lineups a lot of the place. So I think you can trust him, especially in decent matchups like San Francisco coming up this week.
Yeah, maybe in some matchups. I'm not going to go all out and endorse this guy. And that was a pretty lukewarm endorsement from you as well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not like the RB1 muscle hamster returns and resurges.
No.
I just think serviceable 8 to 12 a week. You're not getting 20, but I don't think you're going to get like 2 either. I think he's going to be okay.
12 is pushing it.
All right. that's the ceiling.
Stock down. Jameis Winston bench. Man, the Bucs are just such crap.
I know.
But you feel that this is a stock up for everybody else.
I do. Other than the tight ends, other than Cameron Braid, his boy, this is an offense that leads the league by a humongous margin in passing yardage under Todd Monken taking over as offensive coordinator this year. They become like a college-style air raid offense that just bombs after bombs after bombs. They have 376 passing yards a game, which is nearly 60 more than the next closest Steelers, which is just insane. So obviously this carries huge fantasy football implications, especially when you look at Fitzpatrick, the man now coming in. His 25, get a load of this stat, Nat, his 25.1 fantasy points per game trail only Patrick Mahomes in fantasy quarterback play right now.
I'm aware of that, and that's per game. Also, I mean, I checked him out, I want to say last week. I feel like he's still like the 14th highest scoring quarterback, right, exactly. And he hasn't played in like
only playing weeks. 4 games. I mean, yeah,
right. He's insane. Still like middle of the pack, like borderline starter, just on his total points.
Exactly, it's insane how much production he had in those first 3 weeks. Over 400 yards in every.
He was
single
won by
game.
a mile. He was over Mahomes.
Oh yeah, for a little bit he really was. 400 yards and at least 3 touchdowns in his first 3 full games played. Top 30 points in 2 of those weeks, and now he's out there in pretty much every league because everyone thought now it's the Winston show. We can get rid of Fitzpatrick. If you're quarterback needy, I would go out and get this guy. Yes, their offensive coordinator and head coach Dirk Cutter came out and said, we're just looking at this week. We're only naming him the starting quarterback this week. But ultimately, they don't have Winston under a guaranteed contract for next year. He's got the most turnovers by a humongous margin over these first 3 seasons. Just abysmal play from him. He hasn't really given you that sign. He's the quarterback of the future. Now, we know Fitzpatrick isn't either, but why not? They're still somewhat in contention, and clearly Fitzpatrick is giving you that best chance to win this year, so they're going to ride him out. And this is huge news, too, just to wrap this one up, for Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson. We talked at length before Winston got in there that over those from 2015 to 2018, he ranked dead last in wide receiver passing rating, and was even worse with outside receivers, 76.6 passer rating for outside receivers. It was just abysmal, and we saw Deshaun Jackson especially really take a hit, but Mike Evans too was not nearly playing as well. And then as soon as Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in, what does Mike Evans do? Go off for 179 and a touchdown. His 16-game pace with Fitzpatrick, 116 receptions, 1,704 yards, and 12 touchdowns is compared to 99, 13, 20, and 0 touchdowns. That's 358 fantasy points to 220 fantasy points. Insane. D-Jax similarly goes from 310 fantasy point pace, 68 catches, 1,696 yards, 12 touchdowns, to 48, 816, and 0 touchdowns, 190 fantasy points with Jameis Winston. So clearly those two are trending up huge. Even O.J. Howard caught a nice deep touchdown down the seam, so I don't think he's impacted. I think all the fantasy products are going up outside, of course, Jameis Winston, who gets sent to the bench, sent to the pile. You're cutting him at this point. I don't think he is coming back this year. You never know what's going to happen there, but I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, a nice quarterback to own moving forward, kind of a godsend off the waiver wire for those that need a quarterback.
Packers wide receivers behind Davante Adams taking a hit after Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or something to that effect, emerges. Right. Is that accurate? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's more so just Adams again doing his fucking thing like he does every week, 133 yards. This guy is the unquestioned centerpiece to this attack. But in the absence of Allison and in the absence of Randall Cobb, this Valdez-Scantling creature really emerged and played fantastic.
Yep.
And now behind Adams, it was a complete quagmire for snaps and usage. Cobb had the next closest in terms of catches with 4 for 40. But Scantling out-snapped him and out-targeted him, even though he only hauled in one of them. It went for a score, and then Allison only had one catch for like 11 yards, and he was the guy that was getting double digits every week until he got hurt. So it just seems to me like, which of these guys could you ever trust moving forward if all three of them are on the field and healthy? And the answer to me is none of them. Other than Adams, even Jimmy Graham gets completely washed this week. It's just the targets, Equinarian something Brown, another name in there that's a talented dude that just... He made a sick catch at some point. There's no one you can trust at this point behind Davante Adams as long as they're all healthy. After Scantling emerged, it's just become such a shit pile. You can't have any of those guys in your lineups at this point.
Agree completely, and I know that I'm trying to rush things along, but I gotta take an aside here.
Okay.
How pissed do you think Aaron Rodgers is at Ty Montgomery?
Oh, it's awful, yeah, right?
I mean, you agree the Packers are probably going to win that game, right?
Exactly.
You're giving the ball to Aaron Rodgers with 2 minutes to go. You say we need a field goal. I mean, that's just something he generally gets done.
Right. He just seems to always get it. Exactly.
Sure. And I mean, he's not. I would have said the same thing if it was Brady.
Right.
But I mean, like,
give him a freaking shot, right? Like, you don't have to make that. Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers needs to get what 35, 40 yards,
right.
Something like that.
Exactly.
Maybe less. He's going to get it. He's going to get it. The guy kicks the ball into the end zone. Montgomery doesn't take a knee.
I know. What are you thinking? What are you thinking?
Right. I know you give Rodgers a hard time. Somebody has every right to be furious.
I give him a hard time, but he is damn clutch. I'll give it to him. In the late game scenarios, like I think he's a pussy and I hate him, but yes, he's very clutch in those situations. Absolutely.
He's not a pussy. He's playing on one leg.
Oh, my God. Making sure everyone knows about it, too.
Yeah. I mean, he's a self-promoter. I mean, he definitely likes people to know the Aaron Rodgers brand, but he's definitely not a pussy in that sense. All right, David Njoku, he's still on the Browns. Have you heard?
Oh, I haven't because I just discovered this one on Yahoo. When you click on people's names and it tells you their stat line, you usually get zeros, right? And you see zeros, but it will say at least 2 targets, 0 catches. We've all had Goose Eggs. He didn't get a fucking target after all these weeks of becoming 22 receptions the last 4, the second highest scoring tight end over these last 4 weeks. Baker Mayfield's really revitalized him, and this guy's become that clear-cut number 2 behind Landry. All this stuff. The guy doesn't even get a target. And when you have that on Yahoo, you click his name, it just says
Right.
a dash. Literally just a dash is
Right,
what
as
David
if he would-
Njoku
right.
garnered you. Not even a 0 target. Like, just give me some number. Just a dash is what this guy gave you. Just infuriating to see. It just goes to show Cleveland Browns, as soon as you want to trust one, they're going to tank you and make you forget it. We have a wine line coming, whether it's going to be a part of this podcast or just a little quick standalone gig. And David Njoku is gathering some serious hate. I've been mispronouncing his name, and I deserve to mispronounce it because this guy's a motherfucking 0. Ruined a couple weeks for me. I'm furious about it, obviously. But ultimately, he's still, because it's such a thin position, it's not like you're cutting David Njoku after this horrible performance. He still has a cakewalk schedule. I'm sure he'll bounce back and have a couple big weeks. But man, this was just terrifying to see, and the floor just completely bottomed out as soon as you thought it was sturdy. You got to be nervous about David Njoku moving forward.
Full PPR league, my hometown league. Listen to who Johnny Goodtimes rolled out as his tight end and 2 flex spots in a must-win game. David Njoku at tight end, Geronimo Allison at the first flex, and our boy Mostert from the 49ers.
That's like a
flex.
combined, 3 points, I think, total?
Three points, full PPR. Yes, that's correct.
Oh, my
3 points,
God.
full PPR.
Prayers for
1
Johnny
point
Goodtimes.
per position. 1 point. Right. It was pretty rough. He still has an outside chance of winning his game, too,
that's
because the guy he's
embarrassing.
playing is just absolutely terrible, which is how fantasy goes sometimes.
Right.
All right, but that's pretty impressive. At one point, a good chunk into like the second games, I believe, they all had 0. Like Allison caught his one pass like kind of like early in the third quarter, I think, and Mostert I think got a couple carries in the second half. But like at halftime, they all had 0 points, and he was like, I assure you, this has never happened in like the history of fantasy football.
That is just insanity. We got to get him on the wine line soon.
Yeah, definitely. He's got a lot to whine. He's the biggest whiner I know. I'm not even kidding.
Oh, he'd be perfect for this week.
Yeah, he would be. We should just give him a segment and just like let him complain. All right, Jordy Nelson remains useless in fantasy despite ascension to number 1 wide receiver status. I just want to take a moment right now to laugh in the face of anybody who at any point this year or before the year believed that Jordy Nelson was a good fantasy pickup. So,
We never did.
No, I never did.
Remember all those reports about him running like he was like 15 years younger?
Derek Carr's like, Derek Carr also early. I remember, here's the reports I remember from Derek Carr from the preseason. I remember him talking about, oh man, Jordy Nelson, like, I can't believe they let him go. What an amazing guy. And then I also remember him being like, I can see the dog coming out of Amari Cooper.
Oh my God, yeah.
I was like, remember when he said the dog was coming out? It's like, what dog?
Out. There's
like
nobody else.
Inbred Chihuahua? Like, what are you talking about? No dogs coming out of this, Derek Carr.
Oh, my God.
No credibility. Remember when Derek Carr was like a legit MVP candidate like 2 years ago?
You loved him. You were
He was great. He was my
quarterback.
quarterback. I think I won the championship with Derek Carr.
We got into some heated debates over that. What a tumbling that guy's had.
I still say that the guy was legitimate, probably deserved the MVP. Remember, he broke his leg and his team went from being like the best or second best team in the league to like the worst team in the league in 1 week, basically.
Yeah. Who knows what's happened there?
But I mean, now who is this guy now? Like, I mean, he's just terrible. Anyway, Jordy Nelson also terrible.
Yeah, terrible, a liar. There's nothing to like about Carr. He's just leading us all astray with everything, whether it's his play or his mouth. Awful human being. But yeah, Nelson, what a disappointing effort. And I feel bad. I'm sure I have a couple of these ones on the wine line. I got like Marvin Jones or Jordy Nelson, and I said Jordy. That's horrible. 2 touchdowns for Jones.
You're taking it on the chin there.
Oh, yeah, and I deserve it, please.
Getting angry at us, actually, this week.
There's some angry ones I've heard. I haven't heard the wine line yet, but Joe Hopkins texted me like, oh, man, your hate mail is very big this week. So I'm going to be taking it on the chin when that one happens, and deservedly so. One catch on 4 targets for 14 yards, just abysmal. And I think the reason we included this guy was there's obviously some hope. You got Cooper out, and it's somebody's ascending that number 1 passing role, and Gruden's always had a 1,000-yard receiver out of 11 seasons, and that's going to be Jordy now. And he had a few big games other than that first dud before the bye, but they're going to scheme and get this guy. Nope, none of it happened. Horrendous effort. He's really just seemed like one and done type of guy. You can't trust him at this point. LaFell and Seth Roberts had touchdowns, but Jordy Nelson didn't. If you own him, you got to cut him at this point. There's no point in owning Jordy Nelson anymore.
I'm just going to stick my neck out and say that 11 out of 11 wide receiver streak coming to an end this year.
It would seem so.
Right. I'm willing to put my reputation on the line there unless Nelson has like a 650-yard game in the second half of the season. All right, penny stocks. DJ Moore, my buddy Willie's been waiting all year for this. You think he's worth taking a flyer on?
I think absolutely. The increased involvement. We've talked about him a few weeks in a row now, and nobody has. But now people are starting to wake up because of a monster game. Torrey Smith was out of the lineup, which makes sense for the increased usage, but he gave them every right and reason to move forward doing the same. 6 targets, caught 5 of them for 90 yards. A lot of it was those run after the catch scenarios, which is what they hyped up so much this preseason, that this guy is deadly with the ball in his hand, plays like a running back in that sense. Once he has it, runs angrily, and he added 39 rushing yards to speak about running back on 2 rushing attempts. So this guy is explosive, makes plays every time he's had the opportunity. He just hasn't really seen that opportunity because it's a crowded field. But with Torrey Smith removed, he finally saw it and he really exploded. But the one thing you really gotta like after moving forward is his schedule. It's a complete joke, and we talked about this earlier, but he has by far the easiest schedule moving forward among receivers according to all those gradings and whatnot systems. I'll just run down the matchups real quick for what he has. Tampa Bay this coming week, Pittsburgh the week after, Detroit, the one tough matchup. They've been getting bombed though, so maybe that's not that tough. Seattle, and then 13, 14, 15, and 16, the money-making playoff time. Tampa Bay again, second worst. Cleveland, ninth worst. New Orleans, first worst. Atlanta, third worst. I mean, this guy has the biggest cakewalk of a schedule, and he's out there in pretty much every league, only 15% owned right now. Probably my favorite guy to target on the waiver wire this week. I'd be paying up pretty big, and for as much as I talked about him, I don't own him nearly as much as I should already, so I'm going to try to get him everywhere moving forward. That schedule, just too juicy.
And Cam Newton riding either 6 or 7 weeks now, 2+ touchdowns, longest consecutive longest streak of his career.
I mean, so he's been
so he's airing the ball out. I mean, he's kind of been sneaky good, huh?
He's been. I mean, I don't remember the last time he went under 20-something fantasy points. Every single week he's putting it up. The guy's just a beast. He just had to get out of Mike Shula's system, but now he's got Tampa Bay coming up this week. I mean, who could you have above him in your quarterback rankings? Yeah, only out of his last 6 games, he's only had 1 game under 27 points. It looks like. I mean, the guy's been a beast.
Are we possibly going to see a stack in daily fantasy from you when the Tampa Bay and Carolina game?
I think we're going to see it from a lot of people. I've actually stopped doing daily. I'm very superstitious. Every time I do daily, I end up losing my regular season. So as much as I want to win us $1 million, I need to win this fantasy league real bad. So
yeah, you do.
Yeah,
you do.
Too much
it's
pride.
How much money would you put on winning like your most prestigious league? And I don't mean what's the prize money. I mean like what would you pay? What would you pay to win your league?
Well, I would never want to pay. I want to earn my way.
No.
But like, what do I value it?
You know what I'm talking
about.
Yeah,
my evaluation. Like, how do I value a fantasy win over all those guys and just being superior over them? We have that
thousands,
Fez.
Right?
Oh, thousands. I mean, tens of thousands. I would say.
Yeah, like $50,000 probably.
I mean, this year, there's a good chance somebody goes for the third time, and nobody's won it 3 times yet. So with
that's
type
going
of
to be like a rock in your shoe.
Right, exactly. It'd be horrible to lose it, and it'd be the best to be the first to do it. And I've had like 3 stabs at being the third person. I make the finals a decent amount, and I always fan. I'm fucking like 90s Bills or whatever that team was. Only 2 titles with like 8 appearances. Just a joke. But I don't love my team.
90s Bills would have killed, by the way, to have 2 titles and 8 appearances.
Right, exactly.
That would have been like the best damn thing that ever happened to those guys.
Seriously.
All right, let's go with more penny stocks. Tight end. If you're a tight end guy, if you need tight ends, and I know a lot of people do because there's a lot of shitty tight ends out there that are in starting lineups. David Njoku, for instance. Jack Doyle, Ed Dixon, both out there.
Absolutely.
The Beanstalk.
The Beanstalk coming back with a fucking presence, throwing that humongous hammer onto the field, onto the Raiders for 6 catches, 70 yards, and a TD in his first action back. It's like he's never been out. He outproduced Eric Ebron, which Ebron got in the end zone too, so it's not like you just jump off the ship of Ebron. But obviously his ceiling is much more capped when you got Doyle returning for this type of monster performance. I think he slides right back into that tight end 1 conversation, given how thin that position is and how well Andrew Luck is now suddenly clicking, how Reich's offense is really starting to take off. You got to feel good about Doyle in this scheme that's clearly been tight end heavy all year, especially in the red zone. And then Ed Dixon, you're getting Russell Wilson, who Jimmy Graham led the league in red zone targets among receivers, among tight ends, among everybody. Last year we've seen Will Dissly, some random creature, hauling in touchdowns for the first 3 weeks. He gets hurt. Nick Vannett gets a bit of red zone love in the absence. But then you get Ed Dixon, who's 6'7", just freakish athlete, had had a 175-yard game last year against Detroit. So this guy has some freakish ability, and I think he's going to be utilized as best as possible in this Seattle offense that has just always loved peppering tight ends in the red zone. With that size and with the way Russell's putting the ball wherever he wants it right now, you got to think Dixon, this 52-yard touchdown performance was nothing. There's no fluke there. This is a game that I believe in, and they call him, a merely a last gasp tight end 2 on Roto World. I don't buy that. I think this guy is going to be the real deal, and if you can get him for very cheap right now, it'll be well worth it because he's going to score again, and you're going to wish you had him.
David Moore continues scoring for Seattle. You think he's a real target on the waiver wire?
I mean, we got 2 Moores here at wide receiver, and this is the one that scored the more points out of the few. He speaking of red zone weapons for Russell Wilson, this guy has scored now 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. It's never this was the first week, though. This is what I was really encouraged by. His other performances were always 2-3 catch days, 30, 40 yards in a TD, but it felt flukish. But then this week he goes 4 for 97, used all over the field, and it seems to be emerging as, dare I say, to Doug Baldwin, dare I say to Lockett, the number 1 guy, especially in the red zone at wide receiver. The red zone usage is indisputable at this point. Every single week, these guys seem to be hooking up for a score. He's just got great body control. He goes up and gets it over defenders. He's dangerous in that, but if he's starting to get used more frequently in other areas, he could be a real sneaky wide receiver pickup. Everyone's going to be focused on DJ Moore, as they should, for all the reasons we already listed, but if you don't get on him, I think David Moore is a nice consolation prize at only 4% owned, so he's out there in every league. He's out there in your league. Give him a look. I had him on the watch list, and now it's time to make that plunge. After 4 touchdowns in 3 weeks, you got to like what he's doing.
One big injury to talk about, Tyreek Hill and groin. You hate hearing those 2 words in the same sentence. What do you think, man?
It's heart-wrenching, and you never know. Maybe he plays, and it's nothing serious, but groin strains often linger, and it takes multiple weeks to get over them. They got to buy in week 12. You never know. This is pure speculation. There's nothing that says they're going to hold him out through his bye, but these are just soft tissue injuries that never seem to just go away right away, unless it's very, very minor. We'll find out more on Wednesday when the injury report comes out, but if that happens, obviously, as well as he's playing, Mahomes would take a little bit of a hit with his most explosive weapon. I think he's good enough to keep making it happen. We saw Sammy Watkins completely step up once Hill was removed. Had a humongous 100-yard, 2 TD day. So, I mean, Watkins is going to be a beast if Hill's going to miss any time. I think even Chris Conley becomes worth a stab because this offense is such a juggernaut. Kelsey's looks will go up. Kareem Hunt will continue rising in targets. But Conley might even become a red zone target that you could throw a little buck at and see what happens there as a flex. We still don't know what happens, so let's wait and see until the injury report happens. But yes, this would be a humongous blow if Hill's set to miss time. One of the league's most actually not one of the league's most explosive attack would lose its most explosive piece outside of Mahomes. Not good for anybody if that happens.
Yeah, he's a big part of my Roto Street Journal team. I've been rolling in the RSJ League, so that would actually be devastating to me. Mm-hmm. All right, I want to make a couple comments before we get out of here. Mm-hmm. First thing, and I want to remind the listeners, and I want to remind you and the rest of the Roto Street Journal staff, the Nutcracker set from last year. Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, Frank Gore at running back, Des Bryant at wide receiver, Jack Doyle at tight end. You could send in special UPC symbols to get the golden Tom Brady Nutcracker as well. We are welcoming submissions for a new Nutcracker set this year.
Absolutely.
You can certainly put a guy at the same position again, although, as big as his hog is, I don't think we could put Des Bryant in the Nutcracker.
I think we need to explain, because we've gotten quite a few new listeners that might not have heard our first. So real quick, what is a Nutcracker set now? What are we doing here with Nutcracker?
Well, the Nutcrackers that they have at Christmas, right?
Yes, of course.
All right. Well, imagine instead of putting the nut in their mouth, imagine you put it, kind of in the crotch area. And depending on the size of the hog you're using or the length or whatever, just the sturdiness in general, that's what you use to crack the nut. Frank Gore, obviously, extremely, he's still a candidate. I mean, he's not just going to give up his nutcracker spot just for nothing. And Bridgewater's not even playing, but we've all seen the pictures. So, I mean, come on.
But these days, you got to think Pat
Mahomes is at least talking about getting nutcrackers.
He can crack. Yeah, you could use that as a sledgehammer, not even a nutcracker at this point. So we need
a guy at each position. If you want to do a mail-in guy, Brady seemed like the perfect guy last year. We'll see, but nothing's in stone.
Yeah, the pretty golden nutcracker. I love it.
You can get the solid gold Brady nutcracker. Brought to you by the good people at Fibber McGee's. Anyway. All right. Second thing I want to say, and these are just a couple football questions. Did you see that catch DeAndre Hopkins had that was waved off that they called offensive pass interference?
Caught his nuts. Speaking of catching with your dick, I mean that was a nutcracker right there.
The lasso. I mean that was first of all it was a terrible call. Right. I mean, it was not offensive pass interference. But what a catch! I just want to say what a catch and move on from there. Second thing I want to say about another receiver who's excellent. Is it possible Julio Jones could have no touchdowns this season?
Right, he's going to go for like 1,700 yards and 0 touchdowns.
I mean, is it possible? He's like the wide receiver 5 or something.
He averages only 0.4 red zone targets a game, and that's up, down from 0.7 and 1.1 and 0.8. So he hasn't seen a ton of volume, but when you cut like a little amount of volume in half, it's still a big deal. So I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I could see him. I think he gets to 2. Let's set the over-under at 2 touchdowns because he can do that in one game. He could have 3.
He could.
Do you think he tops 2 touchdowns this year?
Over-under 2.5, you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I do, but that's probably crazy. I mean, why would I think that?
I don't know.
Why would I think he would catch a touchdown? He doesn't do it, so why?
It's great questions.
Last question for you, or last statement I want to make. I'm down 14 in my hometown league. I got Gronk going tonight. What do you think? I have a chance? He's
dominated the Bills in the past. He seems to always put up 2 touchdowns against them. So I think you have a chance. That being said, I don't
know if he's had 14 since week 1.
Yeah, this year he hasn't really been a big 14-point guy. If any team's going to let it happen, it'd be Buffalo in front of his hometown crowd. But I would not be feeling great about it.
I don't. I don't feel great about it at all. The Ravens defense took me for -5, and I didn't start Carson, so I deserve to lose.
A fresh wine line did just come in. Do you have time to listen to it, or should we save it for another? It's 2 minutes, 40 seconds.
No, we're already at 43 minutes, and it's already
well, I'm going to send it to you because if you're able to drop it in there, I haven't listened to it yet, but we won't get our reactions to it. But if it's easy enough to just drop the file in, Joe just sent it across our thing. I guess I got a decent amount of hate this week. I had a few rough predictions, which deservedly so. Maybe someday we'll start a thank you Wolf segment where I can get praised to balance this out. Probably not, though. I feel it's probably a lot easier to garner the hatred and get those submissions than the thank yous. But either way, you might have a wine line for your listening pleasure here. It might be a standalone episode. Either way, be on the listen for now or later. The wine line is back. And if you want to submit something, if I made a bad call, if a player pissed you off beyond belief, you have David Njoku, get you a 0. Go to rotostreetjournal.com/wineline. That's rotostreetjournal.com/wineline. Send it in. We'll feature it on the podcast, edit it to some nice sad music. It's a great segment, and hopefully you get to enjoy it here.
All right. My name's Nat the Truth Jones.
And I'm the Wolf. You can follow me at RotoStreetWolf and on Twitter and Snapchat, rotostreetjournal.com, and of course the Fantasy Fullback Dive. Hit that subscribe button if you don't already. We'll pave that path to your 2018 title. Look forward to hearing you guys join us for that Week 9 preview. Way more than halfway done. Time to get that title, guys. See you later.
All right. Later, folks. All right. That's pretty good.
All right.
All right. I'm going to go try to hammer this thing out. Why don't you just add a description to this?
Yeah, I'll add to the document. Joe sent the wine line, so I don't know how the process works. If it's easy enough to just drop a file in, go for it. It'd be a good closing thing. But if it's not, then no worries. We'll figure out what to do with it.
And we should use it for something. I don't know if it's going to be realistic to drop it into this one at the end. I'll see. I'll check it out.
Yeah,
I'll
see what the process. Because he's already edited it, and there's the music.
I know, but it's not the same audio quality as this, so it's not. I mean, it probably sounds good. Yeah. I might have to fool around a little bit. We'll see. I'll check it out.
Yeah, play around with it. Alrighty, sounds good. I'll do that description right now.
All right, later, man.
See you, man.